Stop learning. Yes, you read that right. Stop learning. Stop consuming. Stop collecting information like a digital hoarder, preparing for an apocalypse that will never come. I know this sounds insane. We live in the age of lifelong learning, where every guru, every course, every podcast tells you that knowledge is power, that learning is the key to success, that the more you know, the further you'll go. But what if I told you that your obsession with learning is the exact thing keeping you from achieving anything meaningful? What if your hunger for knowledge has become the very prison preventing your growth? Before you dismiss this as anti-intellectual nonsense, hear me out. This isn't about ignorance. This isn't about stopping your pursuit of wisdom or understanding. This is about something far more dangerous and far more common than you realize. A modern epidemic that's quietly destroying potential. One podcast episode, one online course, one must-read book at a time. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the smartest people you know are often the least successful, why information without implementation is just procrastination in disguise, and how the paradox of too much knowledge creates analysis paralysis that keeps you perpetually preparing but never performing. You'll discover the psychological trap that turns learning into an addiction, and you'll walk away with a framework that separates true growth from the illusion of progress. Here's what I need from you. Don't skip any part of this video. I know you're tempted. I know you have 17 tabs open right now and 3 other videos queued up. If you're in a rush, watch at double speed. But skipping sections here would be like eating the menu instead of the meal and wondering why you're still starving. Every piece builds toward a revelation that could fundamentally change how you approach growth, success, and your own potential. Because here's what's really at stake. Right now, at this very moment, there are people with half your knowledge and twice your results. There are individuals who've never read the books you've read, never taken the courses you've taken, never consumed the content you've consumed, and they're lapping you in every meaningful metric of success. And the most painful part, you probably know exactly who I'm talking about. So let's talk about the learning paradox. Let's talk about why too much knowledge becomes the enemy of action, why information obesity is more dangerous than information scarcity, and why the person who knows everything often accomplishes nothing. Let me tell you about Bruce Lee, but not the story you think you know. Everyone knows Bruce Lee as a martial arts legend, a philosopher, a cultural icon. But here's what most people miss. Bruce Lee was drowning in knowledge, and it almost destroyed his potential. In his early 20s, Lee was obsessed with learning every martial art form he could find. He studied Wing Chun, boxing, fencing, judo, wrestling, and countless other disciplines. He read every book on combat, philosophy, and physical training. His library was massive. His notebooks were filled with techniques, theories, and analyses. He could talk for hours about the mechanics of a punch, the philosophy of combat, the psychology of confrontation, and he was going nowhere. Lee was caught in what he later called the classical mess. So much information, so many techniques, so many styles that he was paralyzed. He'd spend hours analyzing the perfect way to execute a technique instead of just executing it. He'd debate philosophy instead of applying it. He'd collected an encyclopedia of knowledge but had built nothing with it. Then something changed. In 1964, Lee fought Wong Jack Man in a private match that lasted 3 minutes. Lee won, but he was exhausted, disappointed in his performance. He realized that despite all his knowledge, despite his extensive training, despite his intellectual understanding of combat, he'd been inefficient, sloppy, and far from his potential. This moment broke him, and then remade him. Lee made a decision that would define his legacy. He stopped learning and started eliminating. He famously said, "It's not the daily increase, but daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential." He took everything he knew and asked one brutal question. Does this actually work when it matters? He threw away techniques that looked beautiful but weren't practical. He discarded philosophical concepts that sounded profound but didn't apply to reality. He eliminated entire systems of knowledge that added complexity without adding capability. He went from knowing everything to knowing what mattered. The result? Jeet Kune Do, a martial art philosophy built not on accumulation, but on elimination, not on learning more, but on using less, better. And here's the punchline that changes everything. Bruce Lee became a legend not when he learned the most, but when he stopped learning and started applying the essential. Now just think about your life for a moment. How many books are sitting on your shelf, either unread or, read but never actually applied? How many courses have you bought that you never finished, or maybe finished but, never implemented? And how many podcasts have you consumed that gave you that little dopamine hit of feeling like you're growing without actually changing anything about your behavior? If this resonates, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've felt the weight of unused knowledge. You've experienced the guilt of, consuming more while producing less. You've been trapped in the learning loop, mistaking motion for progress. Let's go deeper for a moment. Let's try to understand the mechanism of this trap. Because honestly, it's far more sophisticated than just simple procrastination. There's this concept in psychology called productive procrastination. That's when you engage in activities that feel productive, but in reality aren't actually moving you toward your goals. And, learning has really become the ultimate form of productive procrastination in the 21st century. Dr. Adam Grant at Wharton has studied this phenomenon extensively. His research shows that people who consume large amounts of professional development content, courses, books, seminars, often, surprisingly, show lower performance metrics than those who consume less but implement more. Why is that? Well, it's because learning creates the illusion of progress without the reality of change. Now just think about what happens neurologically when you learn something new. Your brain releases dopamine, the very same neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. You feel good, you feel like you're improving. But here's the catch. Your brain can't really distinguish between the dopamine hit from learning and the dopamine hit from doing. The feeling of growth and actual growth, they register the same way neurologically. So you become addicted to learning because it gives you the emotional reward of progress without the difficulty of implementation. Dr. Piers Steel, author of The Procrastination Equation, calls this temporal myopia. We end up prioritizing immediate emotional rewards over delayed, tangible results. Learning feels good right now. Implementation, on the other hand, is hard and uncertain, so we choose the immediate pleasure of consumption over the delayed reward of creation. Now let's layer in what psychologists call analysis paralysis. Research by Dr. Barry Schwartz shows that when people have too many options or, too much information, decision-making quality actually decreases. The more you know, the more variables you have to consider. The more variables you consider, the harder it becomes to make any decision at all. You end up stuck in what philosophers call an epistemic loop, constantly seeking more information to make the perfect decision. But each new piece of information introduces new uncertainties that require even more information to resolve. The ancient Stoics saw this trap 2,000 years ago. Seneca wrote in his letters, "Be careful lest you spend your whole life in learning things, but never applying them." He warned against becoming what he called pseudo-intellectuals, people who accumulated knowledge as a status symbol rather than a tool for living. Epictetus was even more direct. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. He understood that knowledge without practice is just sophisticated ignorance. Eastern philosophy articulates this even more precisely. In Zen Buddhism, there's a concept called beginner's mind, or shoshin. It's the idea that having an attitude of openness and lack of preconceptions when studying a subject is actually advantageous, even at an advanced level. Too much knowledge creates rigidity. It closes you off to direct experience. It makes you analyze instead of perceive, think instead of act. The Tao Te Ching states the scholar gains every day, the Taoist loses every day, and by losing and losing again, they arrive at non-doing. By non-doing, nothing is left undone. Sounds paradoxical, right? But it's pointing to the same truth Bruce Lee discovered. Mastery comes from subtraction, not addition. Modern research confirms this ancient wisdom. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that experts in a field often perform worse than beginners when tasks require creative problem solving, precisely because their knowledge creates constraints on their thinking. They know how things should be done, which blinds them to how things could be done differently. There's even a name for this: the curse of knowledge. Once you learn something, you can't unknow it, and that knowledge becomes a filter that limits your perception of possibility. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that people with minimal knowledge tend to overestimate their abilities. But there's a flip side that nobody talks about. People with extensive knowledge often underestimate their readiness to act. They see all the complexity, all the variables, all the things that could go wrong, so they stay in learning mode, perpetually preparing for a performance that never comes. Let's contrast two individuals, both smart, both ambitious, both starting from the same place. But the outcomes couldn't be more different. The eternal student. Meet David. David wants to start a business, so he does what any smart person would do. He starts learning. He reads the Lean Startup, 0 to 1, Good to Great, and, well, 15 other business books. He takes courses on entrepreneurship, marketing, finance, and leadership. He listens to every episode of How I Built This. He attends webinars, joins masterminds, and consumes hours of YouTube content on starting a business. 2 years later, David hasn't started his business, but he can tell you everything about business theory. He knows about blue ocean strategy, growth hacking, product market fit, and minimum viable products. He spent thousands of dollars on courses and hundreds of hours consuming content. When you ask him why he hasn't started, he always has a reason. I'm not ready yet. I need to learn more about X. I just found this course on Y that will really help. Once I understand Z, then I'll be ready to launch. David feels busy, he feels productive, he feels like he's making progress, but he's trapped in the learning loop, mistaking preparation for action. Now meet Sarah. Sarah also wants to start a business. She reads one book, The $100 Startup, not because it's the best book, but because it's actionable and she can finish it quickly. She spends 1 week learning the basics, then she launches a minimum viable version of her business. It's imperfect, it's messy, she makes mistakes. But she's learning through doing, not through consuming. Every mistake teaches her more than any book could. Every customer interaction reveals insights no course can provide. Every failure becomes immediate feedback that shapes her next iteration. 2 years later, Sarah has a functioning business. It's not perfect, but it's real. It's generating revenue. She's iterated through multiple versions. She's learned things about her market, her customers, and herself that no amount of pre-learning could have taught her. When you compare David and Sarah, here's what you notice. David knows more in the abstract, but Sarah knows more about what actually matters. David can theorize, Sarah can execute. David is sophisticated, Sarah is successful. Same starting point, same amount of time, completely different outcomes. And here's the painful truth. There are thousands of Davids for every Sarah. Our culture has created a generation of highly educated, extensively trained, perpetually learning individuals who never actually do anything with their knowledge. Comment below if you've experienced this. If you've caught yourself consuming more and producing less, you'll help others feel less alone. Your story in the comments might be exactly what someone needs to hear to finally break out of the learning trap. Escaping the knowledge paradox. All right, enough diagnosis. Let's talk about the cure. How do you escape the learning trap? How do you shift from consumption to creation, from preparation to performance? Strategy 1. The 70% rule. Stop waiting until you're 100% ready. You never will be. Instead, implement the 70% rule. When you understand 70% of what you need to know, start doing. Why 70%? Because that's the threshold where additional learning provides diminishing returns. The remaining 30% can only be learned through experience. You cannot study your way to that knowledge. You have to earn it through action. Ask yourself right now, what could I start today if I accepted that 70% ready is ready enough? That's your answer. That's your move. Strategy 2, the implementation ratio. For every hour you spend learning, spend 2 hours implementing. That's a 1-to-2 ratio of consumption to creation. Track this, actually track it, because what gets measured gets managed. You'll probably be shocked to discover that most people have this ratio completely inverted. They spend 10 hours learning for every 1 hour doing. Flip that ratio and honestly everything changes. Strategy 3. The single source principle. Stop consuming multiple sources on the same topic at the same time. Pick one book, one course, or one teacher. Implement everything from that source before moving on to the next. Bruce Lee's approach was to master one teacher's system completely before even looking at another. Not because other systems weren't valuable, but because depth beats breadth every single time. The person who learns one thing completely and applies it fully will always outperform the person who learns 10 things partially and applies nothing. Strategy 4. The learning fast. Implement regular learning fasts. Periods where you consume zero new information and focus entirely on applying what you already know. Try this. Take a 30-day learning fast. No new books, no new courses, no new podcasts. Just implementation of the knowledge you've already accumulated. This will feel uncomfortable. Your brain will crave new information like, an addict craving a fix, and that discomfort is exactly the point. It reveals how much of your learning has become escapism rather than growth. Strategy 5. The relevance test. Before consuming any new information, ask yourself, how will I use this in the next 7 days? If you don't have a specific answer, don't consume it. This simple filter eliminates 90% of useless learning. Because here's the truth. If information isn't relevant to something you're actively working on right now, it's just entertainment disguised as education. Strategy 6. The teaching protocol. The fastest way to move from learning to mastery is to teach what you're learning. Start a blog, make videos, teach a friend, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're forced to organize, articulate, and apply the knowledge in a way that pure consumption never requires. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, used what's now called the Feynman technique. If you can't explain something in simple terms, you don't actually understand it. Teaching really forces that understanding. Strategy 7, the delete practice. Like Bruce Lee, start eliminating. Go through your knowledge and ask, what can I remove? What techniques, theories, approaches, or concepts are you holding on to that don't actually serve you? Make a list of everything you've learned in the past year. Now cross out everything that you haven't used. What remains is your essential knowledge. Focus there. So, where does this leave us? We've traveled from Bruce Lee's transformation to the neuroscience of learning addiction. We've explored ancient wisdom and modern psychology. We've contrasted the eternal student with the imperfect executor. We've built a framework for breaking free from the knowledge paradox. But here's the ultimate truth, the one that changes everything. The goal isn't to stop learning. The goal is to stop hiding behind learning. Because that's what most of us are doing, isn't it? We're using learning as a shield against failure. As long as we're still preparing, we can't fail at performing. As long as we're still studying, we can't be judged on our results. As long as we're still consuming, we don't have to risk creating. Learning has become our comfort zone. It's safe. It's low risk. It feels productive without requiring us to be vulnerable. But here's what nobody tells you. The gap between who you are and who you could be isn't filled with more information. It's filled with more implementation. You don't need another book. You don't need another course. You don't need more knowledge. You need the courage to use what you already know. Think about it. Right now, at this exact moment, you have enough knowledge to improve your life significantly. You know you should exercise more, eat better, sleep consistently. You know you should start that project, have that difficult conversation, take that first step. You don't need more information about these things. You need to actually do them. The ancient Greeks had a word for this: phronesis, practical wisdom. Not just knowing what's right, but doing what's right. Not just understanding virtue, but living virtuously. Knowledge that exists only in your head isn't knowledge at all, it's just data awaiting activation. Here's what will happen when you shift from learning to doing. You'll fail, that's guaranteed, but you'll fail forward. Every failure will teach you something no book ever could. Every mistake will refine your understanding in ways no course can match. You'll develop what researchers call tacit knowledge, the kind of deep, intuitive understanding that only comes from direct experience. You'll discover that you knew less than you thought, and that's freeing. Because it means you can stop pretending to have all the answers and start getting real answers through experimentation. You'll also discover that you knew more than you needed, that 70% was actually enough, that all that additional learning was just fear wearing the mask of diligence. And most importantly, you'll start producing results, real, tangible, measurable results, not the feeling of progress, but actual progress, not the illusion of growth, but genuine growth. That's when everything shifts. That's when you transform from someone who knows things to someone who does things, from someone who talks about potential to someone who actualizes it. The world doesn't need more educated people. It's drowning in educated people. What the world needs, what you need to become, is someone who can take knowledge and turn it into action, theory into practice, learning into living. So here's my challenge. Right now, today, identify one thing you already know that you're not doing. Just one, not 10. Not a complete life overhaul. One thing. Maybe it's that business idea you've been researching for 2 years. Maybe it's that skill you keep taking courses on but never practicing. Maybe it's that conversation you know you need to have. Maybe it's that creative project you're waiting to start until you know enough. Take that one thing, and for the next 30 days, stop learning about it and start doing it. Commit to implementation over information, action over analysis, execution over education. Then come back here and tell us what happened. Share your experience in the comments. Tell us what you learned by doing instead of studying. Your story will inspire others to finally step out of the learning trap and into their lives. And if you found this valuable, if it challenged something you needed to hear, then subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because we're dismantling the myths that keep you stuck and building frameworks that actually create change. Share this with someone who needs it. That friend who's always taking courses but never starting, that colleague who's been preparing forever, that family member who talks about what they're going to do once they learn enough. Your share might be exactly what breaks them out of the paralysis of perpetual preparation. Remember, Bruce Lee didn't become a legend by learning everything. He became a legend by eliminating everything that didn't matter and mastering what did. Stop learning, start doing, stop consuming, start creating, stop preparing, start performing. The knowledge you need is already inside you. What's been missing isn't information, it's implementation. Everything you want is on the other side of action, so stop reading the menu, start eating the meal.